Just you guys were there in the very, very beginning when we premiered at South by Southwest.
And we are so excited to follow your journey here. I have so many questions for you, but my first one really is like, what was the initial spark that led you to pursue this documentary, and how long has this journey been for you specifically from where you started with it?
Well, the journey's been really long, years and years. Um, well, there's a number of sparks. I mean, one, it was a no-brainer. No one had done it, right? I was called originally to produce a Cheech and Chong reunion film. That ended up not happening, which was going to be a regular comedy set up at a studio. Tommy went to prison and whatnot, and the movie ended up not happening. And it kind of naturally grew into this. But it became, I always, it's my directorial debut, so I wanted to do something that was theatrically worthy, um, and that didn't fall into some of the pitfalls that I see with certain documentaries that are great stories, not greatly told, because it just relies on uh, too much convention of contrivance, exposition, see and say, straight interview, cut to clips, back and forth. And I felt like the story had scope and lended itself to something grander. And I just wanted to make a theatrical motion picture and watched a lot of documentary. So I just love the genre.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed the inclusion of the animation and also the stand-up bit in between, and then also the narration of Cheech and Chong themselves. What conversations did you have around that, like blending those elements to create like a more engaging narrative versus the traditional narratives the documentary usually do?
Well, I just kind of followed my nose a bit. I knew that I didn't want to fall into convention, but obviously there were certain conventional elements. We were going to use archival footage. I had to get their interviews. So let's first start with the raw materials, which was acquiring the archival. We had a wonderful archival producer, and then get their story laid down, right? So we did about 30 hours of interviews of them individually and kind of covered the gamut. They both had a book, so I read the books. And I always knew that I was fighting for something more. And everybody's been waiting for a Cheech and Chong movie for years. So wouldn't it be great if we could, feel like we got caught in a 15 or 20-minute Cheech and Chong movie that's threaded throughout the documentary that had scope and opened it up while learning about their wild ride. Um, does that answer you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it actually leads me to another question, which is, going digging through the archival footage and seeing it and immersing yourself in all of that, and then actually making your own fresh content with them now. What were the most striking differences and similarities that you found?
Well, uh, as Cheech says, he knows where he is by his hairline in the movie. So the guys obviously are a bit older, and they're more of like elder statesmen now, and they still are and can be Pedro and Man, but they're uh, they're older, right? So I didn't want to try and pretend that they were from the 1970s or 1980s. So, but in terms of, their comedic timing and nature, it's their family, right? Cheech reminded me early on, we're not friends, we're brothers. So they're family. And I was just, or I am happy that they entrusted me with telling the legacy, and hopefully the fans appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that leads me to my other question, which is like, this is the first ever fully authorized documentary on them. What challenges and opportunities that authorization present in terms of access, storytelling, and then the overall narrative?
I think just I have final cut on the film, and what was most important to me was that they liked the film, and they both, at least they tell me that they love the film, and and we've done press together and all that stuff. So that is really really gratifying. Having access, I mean, I wouldn't make a film about somebody if it wasn't fully authorized. It'd be like writing a book, which I I'm not really interested because I don't know that you would be able to get to the truth. It would be it wouldn't be a first person account, right? So having that access and the guys being game and nothing being off limits spoke volumes. And I can't even imagine how many conversations happened. Well, is it authorized? They're like, yes, okay, give it to them that I don't know about versus, well, you know, it's kind of authorized or it's not authorized. So in that sense, I'm spoiled because but again, I wouldn't make a film about somebody unless they were interested in me taking it on.
You also worked with Jim Carrey in the Jim Carrey I Needed Color.
Yeah.
Um, could you did you um did you find any parallels or unique insights between that storytelling and Cheech and Chong's?
No, I mean, they're different people. And I met Jim on Eternal Sunshine, and we've been good friends ever since. And I was around during the early stages of his painting career, and just love him as a person, love him as an artist, and as an actor. But it was good because it was almost like maybe some push-ups because that was about 6 minutes long, and this is 2 hours long. Uh, so, um, but no real parallels except always looking for the essence of the story that we're trying to tell and making it and trying to remain true.
Absolutely. And then the film uses the desert road trip as the framing device. How did this concept come about? What conversations did you have around placing them in like an intimate setting in this way? And I really loved the people popping in the back seat, in and out. That was really great. What conversations did you have around that?
Well, that was kind of the golden ticket at the end. So I feel like for everybody, the financiers, Cheech and Chong, everybody, it was like that, and that was the challenge, right? Was, well, what if it doesn't work? It's expensive. That's like, a lot more than bringing people to a stage and sitting them on a couch and asking the same questions. But I wanted to open up the film and give it scope, make it theatrically worthy, and what would be a device, I don't even like that word, but that wouldn't feel like too contrived, a bit familiar because we've seen them in that two shot. People have been waiting for that. So it just started to become obvious. And then what do we want to talk about? And who do we want to bring on the desert journey? It just kind of reveals itself. So by having the archival and having the portrait interviews, and then realizing, okay, well, we can talk about this in the desert, but if we talk about this in the desert, it's almost like talking about it on the white psych. So why don't we animate those segments like when they first meet, because it'll be more playful. It lends itself to that. But these are some things in the desert that I think could be funny, could be honest, could create tension. So you just kind of chip away at it.
Yeah, and to me, it felt very sweet and like a nice kind of like reunion moment, at least as like part of the audience. For me, those were like the sweeter moments, I thought.
Yeah.
Um, Cheech and Chong exploded into the scene with a unique blend of drug, sex, and rock and roll and humor. How do you think that they managed to ignite imaginations globally and have maintained their relevance over 50 years?
I mean, it's a big question. You know, they were talking about and portraying things that everybody was doing, but nobody was talking about. And the fact that they had the guts is is probably what made them relevant and continues to make them relevant. Some people would think it's whether it doesn't come across like they're trying to be provocative. They're just it's man on the street. This is what's going on. Cheech says nobody was doing drug culture stuff. We tried a bunch of things. People responded to drug culture, so we said, let's do more of that. And he says, essentially, we stole home plate. The other comedians saw it as low-hanging fruit, where this is what people are relating to because this is what they're doing, but everybody's hiding. Why they're relevant today? I mean, it's almost ironic. Some of the things that are, or it is ironic. It's Madison Avenue now, cannabis and whatnot. They couldn't even get on TV. They were the dope smoking hippies. The whole minority thing. All this stuff is so prescient compared to um, it's just to someone that's looking for truth that they're outlaws or outcasts because of it just doesn't. I don't really know what I'm trying to say. It just doesn't feel right, you
And
know?
also, the odds were completely stacked against them. There
Totally.
was, they were successful in spite of all of the things that were stacked against them.
And even within the industry, they would always try and make comparisons, and we have it in the film. And Tommy says, "Well, we're something else," and they are something else. And if they only had a stand-up and record career, it would be a tremendous career. The fact that they went on and made a bunch of movies, and here we are talking about them, 50 years later, and Cheech just had it's Cheech Marin Day on June 20th in the city of Los Angeles. He just got his own day. They've got a thriving cannabis company, and Cheech has his art museum. Tommy is doing, so much stuff in the cannabis space. It's and they're not spring chickens anymore. This has been going on for a long time.
One of the things that I really love about Cheech's museum is because just the fact that he was able to share and give back from his own personal collection to his communities and everything. And I think that that's very inspiring the way that they've not only like won all of this respect, but have given back through a lot of the things that they're doing. So
He
I,
he he brought Chicano art to the forefront. Not just from the music. I mean, this has been going on for years and touring along the world, around the world. Um, and the art is amazing. I mean, these Chicano artists are amazing.
yeah, I highly recommend people head over to Riverside and check it out if they're in the area because it's really awesome. Um, the film also doesn't shy away from the different interpretations of events and some of the unresolved conflicts. Why was it important to include these honest insights and subjective viewpoints rather than presenting a more harmonized narrative?
Because it's the truth. It's a third act engine. It makes it empathetic that we can all relate to because ultimately the film is a love story about these two guys, in my eyes. And anytime you have a 50-year union, there's going to be conflict. So the story, with the exception of the epilogue, ends with the breakup because people are like, well, why'd they stop? So I wanted to tell, I could tell the story from when they were born to today, but I was more interested in telling the story of the origins of the act to the breakup, which is like 1969 to the mid 80s, with a little bit with their origin story beforehand, so we know where they came from and gives us context prior to their meeting. and then we have an epilogue for afterwards. But the conflict is part of their story. And I think for me at least, it's empathetic. There's the yin yang aspect, the older brother, younger brother aspect, all these things that it happens to be Cheech and Chong, but hopefully we see ourselves in these relationships, or we have a cousin or a spouse or a business partner where um, we could relate to the fact of I don't see it this way, or I don't remember it happening this way, or well, that's because of, you were, no, it's because so it keeps it human.
Absolutely. And, with the limited time, I mean, I think you said 30 hours that you had to record with them.
Well,
Um,
that was just for the portrait interviews.
oh, okay. With that information, how did you maximize your time to make sure you captured it authentically and you got those intimate moments?
Well, I think it comes down to preparation. Um, and no, knowing what you want, but also being flexible for the magic to appear. So I always look at it as like you want the railing or the safety net, but hopefully you won't have to use it. And that's really about the preparation of knowing what you want and what movie you want to make at that period. When you have the archival, but you haven't shot the portrait interviews, and you've read their books, you start there. Now that you have the archival, read their books, and the portrait interviews, and you want to shoot the desert, you know more of, what you think you need. And then next thing you know, magic appears on top of that, hopefully. So you get what you thought you wanted, and then this whole other bunch of stuff.
Well, I don't know if this is what you thought you wanted, but I really thought it was a sweet, loving tribute to American icons, and even a love letter to creative storytelling in general, right? Because it's just like how this creativity comes about. When you have audiences watching this, what do you hope that they take away with them?
That they are so much more than the characters they portray. Um, and we have a tremendous amount to learn from them, and uh, that they laugh. I hope the audience laughs too.